Hello everybody, my name is Kat Bowser. I'm your resident fantasy therapist and welcome to my channel. Those of you who are returning, welcome back. Those of you who are brand new, welcome. My name is Kat Bowser. I am a licensed therapist and I'm also an author working on my first novel. So on my channel, I like to dig into what I consider to be the heart of writing, which is the characters, and the heart of the characters is in their psychology. So you will find numerous topics around numerous writing, characters, world building, all that fun stuff, all from a psychology point of view, because that's how I think. So for today, I thought we would talk about an issue that's been coming up a little bit, and I see it more and more with recent books and movies and stuff. So let's talk about a redemption arc. Okay, so when I say let's talk about a redemption arc, I'm not necessarily saying let's talk about how to write a redemption arc, although I will go into that maybe in a later video. Instead, what I'd like to talk about is, do you always need one? This is something I have been seeing cropping up a lot, in that it is very popular now to redeem antagonists, to redeem villains. And when it's done well, it is excellent. It is amazing to witness. I think probably one of the best ones that I can think of is probably Zuko from Avatar The Last Airbender. That was done exceptionally well. But I think a lot of the problem comes in when people think that they have to redeem their villain. And I don't think this is necessarily true. Those of you who have been watching my videos a while know that one of my favorite types of villains are the irredeemable villains, the ones that are just nasty and cold-hearted, and they know it and they love it and they run with it. I personally really like those types of villains because you can do a lot of really cold, cruel, angst-driven stuff with them, and it totally fits. But what I've been seeing more and more is trying to do these types of villains, these cold-hearted, cruel villains, because they make for a great goal in your story for your hero to overcome. They make for a great obstacle. They create great drama, and that's awesome because drama, anxiety, all that fun stuff, that's what really drives the story. But the issue comes up that if you make them, I'm gonna almost say, too cold-hearted, then their redemption arc is gonna kind of fall flat. Basically, a redemption arc, in my mind, has to be believable. People go through change all the time. We are always changing. We're always addressing what we think, what we do. I'm a different person today than I was yesterday. You're a different person today than you were 2 weeks ago. And a lot of times they're very small, subtle changes. But within writing, we can do very large, strong changes of personality, morals, and whatnot. And the thing to keep in mind is that what makes a person change is there has to be a catalyst for it. There has to be something that makes them reconsider their view of the world. So if you have someone who believes wholeheartedly that their family, for example, is the ultimate rulers because they were chosen by God because they are the most morally supreme, etc., etc., etc. Pick your poison. Then to make them change that morality, you gotta address the heart of it, which is this belief that their family essentially is morally perfect. And a lot of the times, if we grow up with this mindset, our brain is very good at rationalizing away things that family members do that may not be morally perfect, but let's make it morally perfect in our mind so it makes sense. So if you're going to throw something in that makes them rethink this, it has to be something very extreme and something they cannot rationalize away. And then that forces them to look at their own morals. And that creates a change that can create a redemption arc. Something that people like to do is to give villains and antagonists morals as they go along. So maybe someone hasn't really developed a lot of morals. And I think this is fundamentally flawed because we all have our own type of morals. I think what people mean when they're saying this is they develop what are considered to be positive moral qualities. But up until this point, they have moral qualities. They're just not what we would consider moral qualities. So for us, attacking someone who can't defend themselves would be a horrible thing to do. But for someone who has grown up in this environment that's usually set up as being without morals, is usually taught something like, if you can't defend yourself, then you're at fault. I am not at fault. And that is a very hard mindset to change. So, that said, is it doable? Absolutely. It's definitely able to be done. But another thing to keep in mind, which I brought up in my trope diagnosis video on the Taking a Level and Badass, is time. You cannot rush a redemption arc. If you want to have your villain be a good guy by the end of the book, then you need to keep two things in mind. One, when is the redemption arc going to start? And two, how bad am I making him? Because if you start him off just being like a schoolyard bully or whatnot, something like that, okay, then by the end of the book, that's probably believable. If you have a series and you don't want to redeem this guy till like the last book in the series, then you could have him be a lot worse, for lack of a better word. You can start him out as this narcissistic, power-hungry dictator if you want, to some degree. And that to some degree is what I want to bring up next. I've seen a lot of villains that are doing these horrific, terrible things. And then by the end of the story, they are either completely redeemed or they're nearly completely redeemed. That is really hard for me to swallow. And if it's hard for me to swallow, I'm sure there's some other people out there who think it's hard to swallow. You have to keep in mind the extent of how bad you're making this person when you're considering, how do I make someone like them now? How do I make what they did in the past forgivable? If you got someone doing essentially war crimes against humanity, like torture of people, mass extinction of people, things like that, I really don't find redemption arcs for those types of people believable because of the extent of what you've done with them. That being said, do I think that makes them a bad character? No. Like I said, I love a character that is irredeemable, that has these horrible traits. But there's also this angle. If you want to take someone who has done these horrible things, have them undergo a moral epiphany of a sort, and try to make themselves better. That's admirable. I think under some circumstances you could make that work. The chances of everybody else in the story accepting this, believing it, and running with it is about nil. If you have someone who has been a dictator for, say, the past 10 years, and then suddenly maybe they go out among the people and they have a moral epiphany and they decide, oh no, I need to change what I'm doing. I need to change my lifestyle. I need to change all this. First off, an epiphany is rarely an epiphany. A lot of times we have what I like to call mini epiphanies, where we do get ideas and thoughts that we want to change. But change is hard. Change is really, really hard. It's one of the hardest things to coach someone through in psychology is change, especially a permanent and overwhelming change. And changing someone from their previous lifestyle, their previous way of thinking, to a completely new way of thinking that is often completely opposite of what they used to do is extremely hard. And most people aren't going to stick it through till the end. So let's say you have three villains, three antagonists. Maybe one can make it and change. The other two might make it part way, or they might make it and then give up and go back to their old ways. Now, obviously, if you want to do all three of your antagonists can make it through to the end, that is your prerogative. That is That is your choice. It is your story. I'm just telling you that I'm going to have a hard time believing it. So I think this is just something to keep in mind when we're talking about redemption arcs is, are they earned? And is it possible to make them feel earned? Like for example, I'll give you guys some characters that I like to think about when I talk about redemption arcs. I'll talk about Demona from Gargoyles from the 1990s. She has what I call a partial redemption arc, in that by the end of the series, at least the animated series, if I'm not going to go into the comics, that's a totally different avenue. By the end of the series, she's better than she used to be. She's not quite as power hungry, vengeful-ish, but only towards certain people. She's developed this love for her daughter that kind of gives her a little bit of a redeeming quality. But she still wants to kill the entire human race. She's totally cool with that still. And I think that was masterfully done because it's believable. I can believe that someone who has been alive for like 1,000 some years and has seen all the horrible things that we humans do can develop some love and some affection for someone else that is close to her in some manner, but not the people that have done these horrible things to her. If that's going to happen, it's going to take a lot more time, and it's going to take a lot more interaction to show her that what she has witnessed over the centuries is not the status quo. And when you have a lot of background and experience that tells you, okay, every time I interact with these types of people, bad things happen to me, or bad things happen to the people I care about, it's very hard to change that mindset because it is a survival mechanism. It has become implanted in your brain. Okay, if I run into these types of people, bad things happen. So I'm going to be bad to them first. I'm going to defend myself. I'm going to be on the defensive right away. And that is something I think that some of these redemption arcs they're missing it. And again, I'm not calling out any specific author, any specific movie, or anything like that. This is just a trend I have been noticing. And I definitely understand why it's popular, because forgiveness is definitely a great trait. I think it's certainly something we should teach. But again, let's keep it on the believable level here. All right, guys, so that is just my little talk about my thoughts on redemption arcs. I hope you guys found it interesting or at least entertaining. As always, if you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to leave them below, or you can always contact me on social media. Feel free to subscribe. I always put up new videos every Thursday and every Sunday. And until next time, please have a good one.